Hi, my name is Athena, and I'm a certified hypnotherapist and past and current life regressionist. And today I want to talk about hindsight. Seems only fitting as we are coming to the end of 2020 that topic should be about hindsight. So, as we take a look at hindsight, one of my favorite expressions that I've always said is that we, drive into the future using only our rearview mirror as a guide. And I feel like that's really applicable. It's really easy for us to, take a look back and say, oh, I wish I would have done that, or oh, I see the error of my ways. But going into the future, it's a little trickier because the future is unknown. And often we say, well, if I had the benefit of hindsight, maybe I would have made different choices. So as we look back at the year 2020, what are the, challenges that you faced, and what is the hindsight that you've learned and grown for yourself? Now, sometimes when we take a look at hindsight, it's a lot more difficult to see things that are more recent and really, dissect them. And it's much more once we've had time and perspective that the clarity on what that hindsight is really trying to show us will come forward. So what I want to do is I want to take opportunity to explain something in my past that took a lot of time and actually several years for me to dissect as far as my hindsight, but it might be something that helps you in taking a look at your hindsight. So first, I'd like to say that soul evolution and growth usually comes about through stress. So a lot of us have had stress this year. Some of us have not had a whole lot of stress this year. It doesn't really matter if it was this year, if it was previous years. You can apply this same thing to, any situation you've had in your past. So the first thing that I want you to understand about hindsight is that you have to first dissect the challenge that you faced. And then the second thing that you have to do is you have to find the lesson in that challenge. And then after you find that lesson, that's when you evaluate your growth. So in my experience, many years ago, I was in a abusive relationship. It was not abusive for almost the first 2 years. And what ended up happening was a situation I never thought I would find myself in. And then I started making bad decisions after. Everything from, cops were called. I was being told I was a victim of domestic abuse. I was in shock. I never thought I would be that person. But then what ended up happening was my head started taking over, and all these different thoughts started coming through, and I was trying to process them and figure things out. And I was in a situation where I could have ended it. I could have ended it right there. All my friends obviously wanted me to be done with that. But what my problem was, I had a lot of remnants from religious teachings that were kind of interfering in my mind processes and making me struggle with how I needed to handle this situation. So one of the problems was the theme of, hate the sin but love the sinner. And then the second one was forgiveness, right? If you don't forgive people, then how do they, learn their lessons, and how do they grow? And if you love someone, aren't you supposed to stick in there with them? And how are you supposed to help them maneuver through their challenges and their demons? And so I had all of these themes that were coming through my mind that I was trying to figure out, me as a person, and how do I feel? And do I just abandon somebody that I did love and that I knew loved me and clearly had problems, right? Or flaws, whatever you want to call them. And the fact that, we all have flaws, right? I have flaws, they have flaws, and who am I to judge the difference between those flaws? And so it took a really long time for me to figure that out. About 2 more years went by, some more incidents happened, and basically I got to one of the worst points in my life, financially, emotionally. I even got to the point where my soul literally felt like it was barely even there anymore, and I had to make drastic changes. And I had gotten myself in this situation in those final 2 years where financially it was not an easy thing to just move or leave. I literally had to let go of a house. I had to let go of a dog. Obviously, I had to let go of the relationship. I had to do a stealth move where I had a bunch of, male friends, and in 2 hours we came in and we moved everything. And when I left to the new place that I was in, I literally had to, unlist my phone number, my address, everything, so that, he couldn't really find me. I spent about 3 months being scared that every day he was going to show up to my work and cause a scene. And interestingly enough, that didn't happen. And not only did that not happen, um, I grew through this. So it took me a long time to figure out why I made the decisions that I made. And in looking back, I realized where, certain lines I didn't realize, couldn't be crossed or shouldn't be crossed. And of course, I'd been, raised with the idea that, oh, you should never, get hit. Nobody should hit you. But I was never really informed or, explained by my parents that if you find yourself in that situation, though, what do you do? Right? How do you get out of it? And even if they had, it would have been like, well, you just leave. Um, and that found to be a lot more tricky than I expected. I understood why there's a lot of women that don't leave or feel like they can't leave. And, a lot of the conflictions that they go on, internally within themselves when they're, victims of domestic abuse. And if there's children involved, then it's infinitely more complicated. So, for me, there was understanding that there were certain lines, and the big line was if somebody, literally is physically assaulting you, it doesn't matter how much you love them. It doesn't matter how much they love you. It's a situation where you've been violated, and you've been violated at the worst degree because they've now done physical harm to you. It was not just a physical abuse, it was emotional as well. There was a lot of other scary things involved. At one point, he, even said he would, end his life if I left him ever. And so there were a lot of things that emotionally I had to deal with. And in looking back, in my hindsight, what I realized was the best thing for me to do would have been to leave him at that situation. The first time. And it was a situation I could have. But then I got myself in a situation where leaving him was infinitely more difficult because we had moved together to a different state. So, for me, I look back and say, well, do I have regrets? And I don't really like to sit in that headspace of having regrets, much more of simply, lessons that I learned. Okay, what did I learn from that? And, what were the red flags even that, showed me that he might be this way? And there were red flags. He had been violent with males. He just never had been violent with females. So there were red flags, and I just kind of chose to ignore those red flags. And for a while, I also tried to play the part of, helping him, thinking that I can help him somehow. But what I ultimately came to is that, everybody kind of has their own demons. And there are some demons that, you just can't help people through. They have to find their own way through and their own way, out of the darkness. So, hopefully that helps you a little bit. Now, as it relates to hypnotherapy, one of the interesting things is, we literally look at hindsight and we look at all of the experiences you've had and said, okay, well, yeah, this situation happened, but what is it that you can learn from it? How can you shift your perspective? So if you were coming to me and you had a situation like mine, the first thing would be, okay, well, I was, a survivor of domestic abuse. But if we look back at, the experience and the perception, and we say, okay, well, what did we learn from it? And how do we get your mindset to shift from, I'm simply, a survivor of domestic abuse, to understanding, oh, here was the situation and here were all the red flags, and these were the things that I ignored on my intuition. And when I look at this, what did I learn from this? How did I grow? And how do I now, moving forward, look at the relationships that I've had since then? And have I made better choices? Have I made better decisions? Have I got myself into a substantially happier relationship than I ever was there? And if that's the case, then that's how we look to shift your perception of things, so that, you don't feel so crippled by past experiences that you've had that have been traumatic to you. So I hope that this little talk on hindsight 2020 has helped you, whether it's been for the year 2020 or for some other year. But I also wish you a happy new year for 2021.